All right, let's dive into Bosnia and Herzegovina. Looks like you brought a ton of stuff for us to go through. Research, articles, even some handwritten notes.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Are you ready to get started with this deep dive?
I am, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's even the name itself, like Bosnia and Herzegovina. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so the name is definitely a little unusual. The boundaries between these two regions, Bosnia and Herzegovina, they haven't always been super clear. Bosnia, that name's been around for a long time. First pops up in Byzantine records, I think back in the 10th century.
10th century.
Yeah, and then it referred to like a small specific territory. Herzegovina, though, that came later, much later.
Okay, so where'd Herzegovina come from?
Well, it's actually kind of interesting. It comes from the German word Herzog, means duke.
So a duke.
Yeah, there was this powerful Bosnian nobleman back in the 15th century. His name was Stjepan Vučić Kosača, and he held the title of Herzog of Hum and the Coast.
Okay, so he was the Herzog.
He was. And eventually, his whole domain, it became known as Herzegovina. And the name just kind of stuck, even after the Ottomans came in, conquered the region, made it part of their empire.
Wow. So essentially, it's named after a duke with a German title.
Exactly.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
All these different influences all coming together.
Yeah, it really shows you how cultures, empires, everything's kind of intertwined in that region over the centuries.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of history, I was going through the notes we have. It's just amazing. Ancient settlements, cave paintings, Illyrians, Celts. This place has been a crossroads of civilizations for forever.
It has. I mean, even before those groups you mentioned, there's evidence of humans living in this area way back in the Paleolithic era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, leaving behind these incredible cave paintings. Then you have the Neolithic period coming in, settled communities, agriculture, unique pottery styles, all sorts of things that tell us about their lives.
Really?
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
We're talking about thousands of years of continuous human presence in this region.
Absolutely.
There's one thing I saw in the notes, I'm curious about it. A tribe called the Doors.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like they built a city that was almost as advanced as the ancient Greeks.
They were amazing. The Doors, yeah. Their capital city was called Dorsen, and it had these massive megalithic walls, just like huge, comparable to Mycenae in Greece.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? They even minted their own coins, crafted these incredibly detailed bronze sculptures, really advanced stuff.
So they were really ahead of their time.
Yeah, they were. Really sophisticated level of craftsmanship, social organization, everything.
That's incredible. So you have all these different cultures, these influences coming together in this area. And then at some point, a kingdom emerges.
Exactly. In the 12th century, the Banate of Bosnia appears.
Banate of Bosnia.
Yeah, ruled by local leaders called bans.
Bans.
Yep. And this Banate, eventually, it evolves into a full-fledged kingdom in the 14th century.
So a kingdom right there in Bosnia.
Right in Bosnia, yep.
And this is where we see Tvrtko the first Bosnian king, come onto the scene.
Exactly. Tvrtko, he was a huge figure, really important.
Okay.
He expanded the kingdom, brought stability, ushered in this period of prosperity, like a golden age for the Bosnian kingdom. Unfortunately, it didn't last forever.
What happened?
Well, like a lot of kingdoms, it eventually fell.
Yeah.
This time to the Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire was on the rise, and they conquered the region in the 15th century.
The Ottomans. Okay, so now we're talking about a major shift. 4 centuries of Ottoman rule. That must have had a huge impact on the region.
It did. It completely reshaped the cultural landscape. I mean, everything from architecture to religion, social structures, even the food they ate. It was a period that saw a lot of changes, including the rise of a significant Bosnian Muslim population.
Wow, so another layer added to this already diverse mix.
Exactly.
It's hard to grasp, like 400 years of influence, that's a long time. Are there any accounts from that period that give us a sense of what life was like back then?
There are. Actually, we have some really fascinating insights from this guy, Alija Shalabi.
Okay.
He was a famous Ottoman traveler, and he visited Bosnia in the 17th century.
17th century, okay.
Yeah, and he described Sarajevo and Mostar as these vibrant centers of trade and culture, bustling with activity. He even wrote about the construction of some landmarks, like the Stari Most Bridge in Mostar. You know that bridge?
Yeah.
It's still there today. It's like a symbol of Ottoman architecture.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like it was a time of a lot of cultural fusion, relative peace, at least for a while.
Wow.
But then things start to change in the 19th century.
Yeah, you're right. That stability didn't last forever.
I'm seeing like rising nationalism, tensions.
Yeah, the 19th century was a time of big changes across Europe, a surge of nationalist feeling.
Nationalism.
Yeah, and Bosnia and Herzegovina got caught up in it. You see the rise of Serbian nationalism, Croatian nationalism, each one vying for influence. It just added another layer of complexity to this already complicated history.
Right. And of course, we can't forget the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914.
Oh, right.
The event that sparked World War I.
That's right, a product of all these geopolitical tensions, nationalist fervor,
Yeah.
And the ripple effects of that event, they went far beyond Bosnia and Herzegovina. The whole world got plunged into this devastating war.
It's incredible how one event in what seems like this small corner of Europe can have such massive global consequences.
It is, yeah.
It's hard to grasp the full weight of that moment and how it changed the course of history. And then, of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina gets drawn into the horrors of World War II as well.
Yeah, the 20th century was a brutal time for this region. World War II, the Bosnian War in the 1990s. It was a lot of suffering, a lot of trauma. And the legacy of those conflicts, it's still felt today.
Yeah, it's hard to even comprehend the scale of the suffering that happened.
Right.
So after enduring all of that, where does Bosnia and Herzegovina stand today?
Well, that's a great question, and one we'll delve into a little more in our next segment.
Right. But what I can say now is that despite everything, this country is showing remarkable resilience, rebuilding slowly but surely, and striving for a better future.
It's a powerful story.
It is.
All right, so we're going to have to pause here for now. But don't worry, we'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Bosnia and Herzegovina.
We'll be back.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive. We left off with Bosnia and Herzegovina right after the Bosnian War in the 1990s. 1995, the Dayton Agreement gets signed. What happens next?
Well, the Dayton Agreement, it stopped the fighting, but it also created a very unique and complex political system.
Okay, so how does it work?
So the country is divided into two entities.
Two?
Yeah. The Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska.
Okay, so two, semi-autonomous regions within one country.
Exactly.
That sounds complicated.
It is. Each entity has its own government, parliament, even its own police force. And they have some control over things like education and healthcare.
Wow. It was a way to try and address those deep ethnic divisions that fueled the war. Give each group a sense of self-governance.
It sounds like they were trying to walk a very fine line, trying to create a sense of unity, but also recognizing those deep divisions that exist. So how well has this system actually worked in practice? Has it helped to heal the wounds of the past? Or has it created new problems?
Well, that's a question that people are still debating. Some people argue that this decentralized structure, it's the only way to keep the peace, prevents one group from dominating the others. But then others say that it actually reinforces those ethnic divisions, makes it harder to build a unified national identity, and it just slows down progress overall.
Yeah, it's like trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces don't quite fit.
Exactly.
So what about everyday life for people in Bosnia and Herzegovina today? Are there signs of reconciliation, of healing? Or is the war still casting a shadow over everything?
Well, it's a process for sure. It takes time. The scars of the war, they run deep. But you do see some inspiring examples of communities trying to bridge those divides. There are organizations working on interethnic dialogue, individuals trying to rebuild trust, young people who are kind of challenging those old narratives of division that they inherited.
Yeah, it's always amazing to see those individual efforts, those stories of people trying to connect and understand each other.
Right.
But I imagine there are still some pretty big challenges, right?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest issues is the economy. The war, it really devastated the country's infrastructure, its industry. Unemployment is still high, especially among young people, and corruption is a problem too.
So rebuilding the economy, that's crucial for creating a more stable future.
It is. A stronger economy, it could create opportunities, reduce some of those economic anxieties that feed into ethnic tensions. It could give people a sense of shared purpose, a reason to work together.
You mentioned earlier that Bosnia and Herzegovina is hoping to join the European Union at some point. Would that help? Would that provide a boost?
I think a lot of people hope so. There's this idea that being part of the EU, this larger, more prosperous entity, it could bring some positive change. But to join the EU, Bosnia and Herzegovina has to meet certain criteria. Things like democracy, human rights, the rule of law, all of that.
Right, so it's not just about economic benefits, it's about aligning with those European values and institutions. I guess that can make sense, but are there any concerns about maybe losing some control, some sovereignty. I mean, joining a bloc like the EU, that has to come with some trade-offs, right?
Yeah, for sure. Some people are worried about becoming too integrated, maybe losing some of their cultural heritage or becoming, too dependent on Brussels. But others say the benefits outweigh the risks.
So it's a balancing act.
It is, weighing the potential gains against the potential losses.
Yeah, it must be a really tough decision, especially for a country that's already dealing with so much internally.
Exactly. And it's important to remember the EU itself, it's not one big happy family.
Right.
There are different opinions within the EU about enlargement. Some countries are more open to new members than others.
So even if Bosnia and Herzegovina meets all the requirements, it's not a guarantee that they'll be welcomed in.
Not necessarily, no. There's geopolitics involved, economic considerations, even internal EU politics. It's complicated.
Wow, it really makes you realize that Bosnia and Herzegovina's fate isn't entirely in its own hands.
Yeah.
There are all these other forces at play.
That's true, yeah. But even with all that, the choices that they make internally, those will have a big impact on their future. If they can address those internal challenges, like, strengthening the rule of law, creating a more unified system, they'll be in a much stronger position, regardless of what happens with the EU.
So focusing on internal strength, resilience, that's key.
Exactly. Ultimately, Bosnia and Herzegovina's future, it depends on finding that balance, between its unique identity and this desire for integration, for progress.
It's a complicated situation, for sure. But it's fascinating. It's a reminder that history is not just about the past. It's about the choices we make now that shape the future.
Well said.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Ancient civilizations, empires, wars, complex political landscapes. It's clear that Bosnia and Herzegovina has this rich and layered story.
Yeah.
And it's a story that's still being written.
Yeah, it really is a microcosm of European history. You see these broader trends, cultural exchange, conflict, the search for unity and peace. It's all there.
And it's a reminder that history isn't just dates and facts. It's about people, their choices, and the forces that shape their lives.
Right.
Well, seems like we've reached the end of this part of our deep dive. But don't worry, we'll be back soon to continue our exploration.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been through quite a journey. Ancient civilizations, empires, wars, and the current state of things. It's amazing, really.
It is. Really makes you think about how history, it's not just, facts and dates in a textbook. It's about people's lives, their choices, this constant back and forth between cultures and different forces.
Yeah, it's a tapestry, isn't it? Speaking of back and forth, we were talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina's future and the possibility of joining the EU. What would that actually look like, and how would it impact the country?
Well, that's a big question. There's no easy answer. But we can, look at some possible scenarios. Let's say Bosnia and Herzegovina does join the EU. They would likely see some economic benefits.
Yeah, like what?
More trade, more investment, things like that. And it could also bring more political stability, strengthen the rule of law, because to join the EU, they'd have to meet certain democratic standards.
So it's not just about the money, it's also about aligning with European values and institutions.
Exactly. EU membership, it often acts as a sort of catalyst for internal reforms. Countries have to address things like corruption, make sure their democratic processes are solid, protect human rights, all of that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't there be concerns about, maybe losing some control, some sovereignty? I mean, joining such a large bloc, it has to come with some trade-offs.
Right. Some people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they worry about that, becoming too integrated into the EU, losing some of their cultural heritage, becoming too dependent on Brussels, things like that. But then others argue that the benefits of membership are bigger than those risks.
It's a tough decision, isn't it? Trying to balance potential gains with potential losses.
Yeah.
Especially for a country that's already dealing with so much division internally.
It is. And we also have to remember the EU itself, it's not some perfectly unified entity. There are different viewpoints within the EU about letting in new members. Some countries are more enthusiastic than others.
So even if Bosnia and Herzegovina does everything right, ticks all the boxes, there's no guarantee they'll be welcomed in.
That's the reality, yeah. There are geopolitical factors, economic concerns, even internal EU politics at play. It's complicated.
It really is. It makes you realize that Bosnia and Herzegovina's future, it's not entirely up to them. There are these bigger forces that they can't control.
True. But even with all of that, the choices that they make internally, those are going to have a huge impact. If they can work on those challenges, things like strengthening the rule of law, building more unity, they'll be in a much better position no matter what happens with the EU.
So focusing on internal strength, on being resilient, that's really important.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, Bosnia and Herzegovina's future, it hinges on finding that balance,
Yeah.
between preserving their unique identity and pursuing integration and progress.
It's a complex equation, that's for sure, but one that's definitely worth thinking about. This whole deep dive has been incredible. So much information, so many insights. We've gone from ancient civilizations to empires, wars, complex political situations. It's clear that Bosnia and Herzegovina, it has this incredibly rich and layered story. And it's a story that's still being written.
It's a microcosm of European history, really. You see those broader trends, cultural exchange, conflict, the search for unity and peace. It's all there.
It's a reminder that history, it's not just about the past. It's about the choices we make today that shape the future. And a huge thank you to you, our listeners, for coming along with us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, gained a new perspective on this amazing country.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep.